You didn't stumble upon this by chance. Something in you, ancient, quiet, and untamed, led you here. Not the version of you that answers emails or plays nice, but the deeper self, the one that aches when the world goes quiet, the one that senses when life no longer fits, even if it looks fine on the outside. Maybe lately, you felt the unraveling. You wake up, and nothing feels real anymore. Conversations feel hollow. Goals feel empty. The life you built feels like it belongs to someone else. And beneath it all, there's a whisper you can't ignore. A restless longing for something truer. Something that no achievement, relationship, or routine can give you. If this is you, then hear this. Your life isn't falling apart. It's breaking open. Carl Jung once wrote that we don't become enlightened by imagining light, but by making the darkness conscious. And right now, your soul is doing exactly that. Not because you failed, but because you're ready. There's a version of you that no longer fits inside the old story. The masks you wore for love, for safety, for belonging, they're slipping. And it's terrifying. But it's also sacred. This isn't your breakdown. It's your breakthrough. The signs are already here. And if even one of them echoes inside you, then your soul has already begun its quiet revolution. Let's begin. Sign number 1. You no longer tolerate the inauthentic. And start pulling away from toxic patterns. It doesn't happen all at once. It begins in the smallest, quietest ways. You find yourself getting irritated by conversations that once entertained you. You scroll through your phone and feel nothing but exhaustion. You're sitting across from people you've known for years, but suddenly you feel like a stranger in your own life. Like you're playing a part in a story you no longer want to tell. And something inside you whispers, "This can't be all there is." That whisper doesn't go away. In fact, the more you try to ignore it, the louder it gets. You start noticing the ways you've been shrinking yourself just to keep the peace. You see the little betrayals, the times you smiled when you wanted to scream, stayed when you wanted to leave, agreed when your soul said no. At first, you call it burnout, or maybe mood swings. But deep down, you know, this is something bigger. This isn't a bad week. This is your soul revolting. You can no longer tolerate the inauthentic, not in others, and especially not in yourself. You look at the people around you and realize some of them were never really with you. They were with the version of you who tolerated crumbs, who laughed at jokes that cut too deep, who accepted inconsistency, confusion, and emotional vagueness as just the way it is. But now, that version of you is dissolving. And with that dissolution comes the clarity. You're not cold. You're just done. Done pretending you don't feel everything. Done explaining your worth. Done making room for chaos that disguises itself as love. Carl Jung taught that the psyche will do anything to avoid facing the truth until it can't anymore. And that moment, when you can no longer lie to yourself, when your tolerance for the fake drops to zero, that's when real transformation begins. Not in fire and lightning, but in silence. In that soft, steady refusal to keep betraying yourself. you may start pulling away. Not with drama, not with accusations, but with clarity. You stop chasing, stop explaining, stop playing emotional contortionist for people who never intended to meet you halfway. It doesn't mean you don't love them. It means you finally love yourself more. You start craving solitude, not to hide, but to detox from the noise, the roles, the projections, the guilt. And in that quiet, you begin to see what you couldn't see before. You see how much energy you gave away to people who never really saw you. You see how long you've stayed in situations that starved your spirit. You see how much of your identity was built around keeping others comfortable, while your own needs went unmet. And now, you're done playing small. That doesn't mean you become unkind. It means you become honest. You start saying no without guilt. You set boundaries without apology. You remove yourself without fanfare. Because now you understand. Your energy is sacred. Your nervous system was never designed to be someone else's dumping ground. Your heart was never meant to absorb another person's chaos in order to feel connected. Your worth was never meant to be proven, only remembered. So, you begin the sacred work of releasing. You release the friendships that drain you, the habits that numb you, the dynamics that twist you into someone you're not. And yes, it hurts. Not because you're doing something wrong, but because you're doing something real. Letting go is grief. Even when it's necessary. Even when it's right. You grieve the comfort of familiarity, the illusion of belonging, the identity that once protected you. But in that grief, something holy awakens. A deeper you, a truer you. A version of you that has no interest in survival through self-abandonment. And when that version begins to rise, everything changes. You stop trying to fix people who don't want to be healed. You stop justifying things that clearly hurt. You stop betraying yourself to earn a seat at tables where your soul was never meant to sit. You realize some people weren't companions. They were mirrors of your past self, the one who didn't know any better. Now, you do. Now, you feel it in your body when something isn't right. You can't unfeel it. You can't unknow it. You can't go back to pretending it's fine. And you don't want to. This isn't bitterness. This is rebirth. This isn't detachment. This is evolution. Carl Jung said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." That's what this is. You're no longer calling your pain destiny. You're no longer mistaking trauma bonds for intimacy. You're no longer worshiping stability at the cost of your soul. You're waking up to your patterns, to your power, to your path. And with every toxic tie you untangle, every pattern you break, every silence you honor, you come closer to yourself. You're not breaking down. You're breaking through. And no, not everyone will understand. Some will call you selfish, too sensitive, too much, too distant. Let them. You're not here to live a life that makes others comfortable. You're here to live a life that makes you whole. And sometimes that means walking away from the familiar, from the easy, from the almost good enough. Because you know now, almost isn't love. Almost isn't peace. Almost isn't the truth. So when you feel that sacred discontent rising, when your soul starts pulling away from what used to feel like home, don't silence it. Honor it. That's not fear. That's freedom. You are not losing people. You are losing illusions. You are not breaking bonds. You are breaking cycles. This is your becoming. And it begins, not with a bang, but with a whisper. The moment you choose honesty over habit, peace over performance, alignment over attachment, this is the first sign that your life isn't ending. It's just beginning to get real. The most powerful phase of your life doesn't start with applause. It starts with release. And you, right now, are ready. Sign number 2. You start questioning everything you once called truth. You don't mean to. You're not looking for it. But one day, it happens. A crack appears. Maybe it's subtle. A passing thought during your morning routine, or the quiet emptiness you feel after reaching a goal that was supposed to make you happy. Maybe it's louder. A breakup, a breakdown, a burnout that leaves you staring at the ceiling, asking, what the hell am I doing with my life? Either way, it shakes something loose. The ideas you once built your life on suddenly feel hollow. Not wrong, necessarily, just not yours. And now, your mind, and more importantly, your soul, can't unsee it. You question the job you once chased with everything you had. You question the values you swore were yours. You question the version of success you inherited, the one that told you more is better, faster is best, and exhaustion is a badge of honor. You question the faith you were born into, the labels people gave you, the labels you gave yourself. You question love, marriage, friendship, God. Not because you've become cynical, but because you're finally becoming honest. You realize how much of your life has been shaped by things you never consciously chose. Family systems, social norms, generational expectations, unspoken rules about who you're allowed to be. And now, none of it feels real anymore. At first, it feels like standing on shifting ground, like the foundation of your identity is coming undone. And it is, but not to destroy you, to reveal you. Because beneath every should you've ever followed is a truth you've been suppressing. And now, that truth wants to breathe. You stop being able to lie to yourself. You can't fake excitement. You can't force connections. You can't make yourself care about the things you're supposed to care about. You become allergic to surface level anything, to small talk, to shallow ambition, to fake smiles and dead conversations. And in that collapse of the old, something radical begins to take root. Authenticity. Real, messy, uncomfortable truth. The kind of truth that doesn't always make you likable, but makes you free. Carl Jung wrote, "We are not what happened to us. We are what we choose to become." But to choose who you want to become, you must first question who you've been. And that's what this sign is. not a crisis, a reckoning. You stop trying to fix your life and start trying to feel it. You let the masks slip. You let the pressure drop. You let the questions hang in the air without rushing to fill them with answers. You begin to understand that confusion is not failure. It's the beginning of clarity. Because when the life you built starts to feel misaligned, it's not because you're broken. It's because you're waking up. You become less interested in being right and more interested in being real. You stop trying to control every outcome and start listening to your body, your intuition, your dreams. You stop obsessing over what people think and start asking, what do I think? What do I feel? What actually matters to me? And that's when things begin to shift. You may lose things: stability, certainty, community, but you gain something bigger: sovereignty, self-respect, silence that feels like home instead of emptiness. You realize you don't want to keep performing. You want to belong to yourself. So you start building your own values from the ground up. Not inherited, not borrowed, not rehearsed. You give yourself permission to not know, to change your mind, to evolve in ways that make no sense to anyone but you. And even though it's scary, it's also sacred. You are no longer trying to become what others want you to be. You are becoming what your soul remembers you already are. And yes, people may not understand. They may say you're different. You've changed. You've lost your spark. You've walked away from who you used to be. And they're right. You have changed. Because you were never meant to live a life that required you to stay small. You were never meant to shapeshift for approval. You were never meant to keep lying to yourself just to be accepted by others. You were meant to question, to break, to burn, so you could be reborn. And this rebirth is not loud, not public, not performative. It happens in your kitchen, crying over dishes you suddenly don't want to wash. It happens in the car, pulling over because the song on the radio cracked open something ancient in your chest. It happens in therapy, in prayer, in solitude, in the quiet courage it takes to say, "This life no longer fits me, and I deserve better." You don't know what better looks like yet, but you trust the feeling. You trust the ache. You trust the deeper voice inside you that says, "I'm not done. There's more. More aliveness. More truth. More you." Carl Jung also said, "Your vision will become clear only when you can look into your own heart." This is the moment you start looking. And when you do, you'll find that nothing out there can compare to the peace of finally honoring what's in here. This is not weakness. This is a strength. The kind of strength that doesn't come from muscles or titles, but from choosing truth over comfort. It's not easy. It's not quick. It's not clean. But it is yours. And the more you lean into it, the more your world begins to shift. You meet people who speak your soul's language. You stumble upon books, conversations, and places that make your heart whisper, "Yes, this." You start to feel less alone because your inner world is finally catching up to your outer life. You begin living from yourself, not for others, And that, right there, is the beginning of everything. Sign number 3. You begin detaching from the person you used to be. It doesn't happen with fireworks. There's no dramatic goodbye. Just a quiet distance growing between who you are and who you used to be. You wake up and realize that your old life doesn't fit anymore. Not because it's wrong, but it feels like someone else's story now. You can't quite explain it to others. How the job that once fueled you now feels like an empty routine. How the clothes in your closet feel like costumes. How the conversations you used to enjoy now feel like echoes in a room you no longer live in. You feel like you're fading from your own past, and it scares you, but it also feels right. Because deep down, you know, you're not the same. Not in a superficial way, but in the quiet cellular way that only you can feel. There's a soft unraveling happening within you. The identity you've worn for years is slowly slipping off your shoulders. The roles you've played, the habits you've clung to, the relationships you've maintained, they all start to loosen their grip. And you don't fight it, because some part of you understands to become who you really are, you must release who you thought you were supposed to be. Carl Jung called this the shedding of the persona, the mask we wear to survive, to be accepted, to belong. But the price of that mask was your truth. And now, your soul wants it back. You start seeing your life with clearer eyes. Patterns that once felt comfortable now feel suffocating. People who once felt like home now feel like old chapters you've already read. Your own voice, the one you silenced to fit in, begins to rise. And suddenly, you're no longer interested in playing the part. You want real. You want depth. You want silence that feels safe. You want relationships where you don't have to explain your soul every time you open your mouth. You're not angry. You're not bitter. You're just done pretending. Done pretending you enjoy things you don't. Done pretending you're the same person people remember. Done pretending that staying the same is noble. Because you're not here to repeat. You're here to evolve. This detachment doesn't make you cold. It makes you clean. It clears the space where your soul can finally breathe, where your spirit can stretch, where your truth can grow roots. And yes, it's lonely. God, it's lonely. Because when you outgrow who you were, you also outgrow the life that came with it. You may find yourself sitting in rooms full of people you love and still feel a strange distance, not because you don't care, but because you've changed and they haven't met the new you yet. Or worse, they don't want to. You'll try to explain, try to make them understand. But eventually, you'll realize this isn't about convincing anyone. This is about honoring the person you're becoming. You start spending more time alone, not to isolate, but to integrate. You sit with your silence like it's sacred. You cry without a reason you can name. You feel grief not just for what you've lost, but for the versions of yourself you'll never be again. And that grief is holy, because it means you lived. It means you tried. It means you're no longer clinging to survival at the cost of your truth. You start asking different questions. Not, what should I do? But, what feels right in my body? Not, What do they expect of me? But what does my soul need right now? These aren't small shifts. They're seismic because they move you from the outside in, from performance to presence, from pleasing to becoming. Carl Jung wrote that individuation, the process of becoming whole, requires us to integrate the parts of ourselves we've abandoned. And you feel it now. You feel the call to bring back the lost pieces, the child who dreamed, the teen who rebelled, the young adult who still believed love could heal. They're not gone. They've just been buried beneath years of roles, rules, and repression. But now they're knocking, and you, for the first time, are ready to answer. You stop chasing the version of you that impressed people. You stop striving to be easy to digest. You stop bending over backwards to be palatable to those who never really saw you. Because you finally understood that authenticity is not about being understood by others. It's about being at peace with yourself. You begin to live more slowly, deeper, with more intention. You stop reacting and start responding. You stop rushing and start feeling. And life responds in kind. You meet people who mirror your inner shifts. Not many, but a few. People who don't flinch at your honesty. Who doesn't shrink from your silence. Who doesn't ask you to be smaller so they can feel safe. They arrive like whispers, like soft reminders that you're not crazy for changing. You're just courageous enough to evolve. And the more you trust that, the less you need permission. You no longer explain your choices to people who are committed to misunderstanding you. You no longer seek closure from people who never gave you clarity. You no longer water down your essence just to keep peace that costs your peace. This is detachment, but not from life, from illusion, from identities that were never really yours, from obligations that were never aligned, from versions of you that were born from fear, not love. And in that space, you remember, who are you? What you care about? What you were always meant to be? It's not easy. It's not linear. Some days, you'll want to go back, not because it was better, but because it was familiar. But you won't stay long, because once you taste the freedom of being real, you can't go back to being liked. So you walk on, not because the path is clear, but because it's yours. Carl Jung once said, "The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely." And yet, here you are, doing the work, facing the discomfort, releasing the roles, stepping into a version of you that doesn't need validation to exist. This is not a phase. It's becoming. And if it feels like you're losing everything, it's only because you're finally gaining yourself. Sign number 4. You begin feeling drawn to solitude, silence, and inner stillness. Not to hide, but to hear. You stop wanting noise. The constant stimulation, the notifications, the background music of endless opinions. It no longer comforts you. It crowds you. You find yourself turning down invitations, leaving group chats on read, and skipping small talk. Not because you're angry, not because you've changed, but because something sacred is stirring inside you, and the outer world is suddenly too loud to hear it. For the first time, silence doesn't feel like loneliness. It feels like home. You sit quietly in your room and feel more alive than you did in a room full of people. You go on walks without your phone, not because you have to, but because you want to. You watch the wind move through the trees and realize it's been speaking to you all along. You just weren't still enough to listen. Carl Jung wrote that the soul speaks in symbols, not sentences, and that to hear it, we must learn to listen with more than our ears. And so, you begin to slow down. Not because life forced you to, but because your spirit demanded it. You wake up and don't immediately reach for the world. You linger. You breathe. You wait to hear the subtle pulse of what your soul is trying to say before letting the noise in. And what it's saying is simple, but terrifyingly clear. I've missed you. You start to realize how long you've been in survival mode, how much of your energy has gone into performing, protecting, planning, producing, how rarely you've allowed yourself just to be, still, unproductive, unimpressive, unapologetically you. You remember the parts of you that used to love the quiet, the child who could sit for hours watching the sky change colors, the teenager who wrote poems in the back of notebooks, the adult who once believed that being present was enough. They've been waiting, and now you're finally coming home. This pull towards solitude is not avoidance, it's initiation. It's not about escaping the world. It's about remembering who you are without it. Because something inside you knows. You can't hear your truth when you're drowning in everyone else's volume. So you begin to pull back, not out of spite, not to punish anyone, but to preserve something precious inside you that is just now beginning to bloom. And in that quiet, something unexpected happens. You start to feel again. Not just emotions, but yourself, your breath, your pulse, your subtle knowing that rises when you stop trying to be on. You realize how much wisdom has been buried beneath your busyness. You hear thoughts that don't belong to you, scripts inherited from fear, family, society, and you gently lay them down. You feel desires that once seemed selfish, now rising like prayers. You uncover memories, long repressed, that still hold the keys to your healing. You begin to notice the space between thoughts, and in that space, peace. Not the peace of control, not the peace of getting what you want, but the peace of presence, of being with what is, without needing it to be different. Carl Jung once said, "In all chaos, there is a cosmos. In all disorder, a secret order." And it's in solitude that you begin to see it. The order behind your pain, the pattern behind your longing, the divine logic of everything that's been unraveling in your life. You begin to trust yourself again, not because you figured it all out, but because you finally stopped running. You realize that solitude doesn't mean emptiness. It means enoughness. It means you no longer need constant reflection from others to remember who you are. You find yourself drawn to nature more than nightlife. Books are more than banter. Conversations that nourish rather than impress. You let go of the pressure to network, socialize, Stay in the loop. You stop chasing relevance and start chasing resonance. What feels true? What brings your nervous system to stillness? What makes you say, yes, this? This is who I am when no one's watching. And in doing so, your inner world begins to rearrange. You begin to hear the voice beneath the noise. The one that doesn't shout or compete, but knows. Your intuition sharpens. Your boundaries strengthen. Your priorities are clear. You no longer want to fill every moment. You want to honor them. Even your relationships change. You stop reaching for people who can't meet you in your stillness. You stop entertaining those who only connect through chaos. You crave eye contact, soft presence, shared silences that say more than words ever could. And when you don't find that, you'd rather be alone. Because now you understand. Solitude isn't the absence of love. It's the presence of alignment. It's where the noise dies and the truth begins. It's where God whispers, where your ancestors gather, where your deepest self meets you in the mirror and says, I've been here all along. This stillness is your sanctuary. This quiet is your teacher. This space you once feared is the birthplace of your becoming. So you protect it. You no longer apologize for needing time, needing space, needing fewer voices and more you. You no longer betray your body just to avoid disappointing others. You no longer ignore the ache that says, go inward. You honor it. You follow it. Because you know now. You can't heal at the same frequency that hurt you. You can't return to yourself while staying addicted to distraction. And solitude, real, honest solitude, is where the healing begins. You don't need a retreat, or a sabbatical, or a mountaintop epiphany. You just need moments, sacred, daily moments of reconnection. Moments where you breathe before you react, where you sit before you speak, where you ask your soul what she needs and listen. Carl Jung taught that wholeness is not achieved by cutting off parts of ourselves, but by embracing all of them. And solitude is where that embracing begins, where your shadow meets your light, where your fear meets your faith, where your past stops chasing you because you finally turn around to face it. So, no, you're not pulling away from the world. You're pulling inward toward the deepest, most honest part of yourself. The part that doesn't need to be explained. The part that doesn't care how it looks. The part that has waited patiently, year after year, for you to slow down enough to come home. This isn't isolation. This is integration. And if it feels unfamiliar, if it feels uncomfortable, that's okay. New truth always feels like silence at first. So be still. Let it wash over you. Let it hold you. Let it speak to you in ways the world never could. You are not withdrawing. You are remembering. You are not giving up. You are tuning in, and in that quiet space where nothing is expected of you, everything begins. Sign number 5. You begin to prioritize alignment over achievement and redefine what success means. It happens quietly. You don't announce it. You don't write a manifesto. You just wake up one day and realize that the things you used to chase don't matter like they used to. The ladder no longer calls to you. The title doesn't feel as shiny. The admiration of others feels strangely empty. Something deeper is shifting. You begin to feel a quiet resistance to performing. You're no longer interested in being impressive. You want to be in integrity. You're no longer driven by proving something. You're guided by feeling something. You stop asking, "What will people think if I do this?" and start asking, "What will it cost me if I don't?" Carl Jung once said, "The shoe that fits one person pinches another." And now, you're finally realizing that much of your ambition was shaped to fit someone else's foot. Society told you what success looked like: bigger, faster, louder, more money, more attention, more validation, more speed. But your soul is craving something else entirely. More truth, more peace, more meaning, more you. You begin to feel the difference between a life that looks good and a life that feels good. And you choose feeling, even when it makes you look like you're falling behind. Because now you understand, you weren't born to win a race you never signed up for. You start questioning what making it even means. Who defined it? Why did you believe it? You realize how much of your life has been driven by the need to be enough in someone else's system. And now, you want to build your own. You want slowness that isn't lazy. You want presence that isn't passive. You want a purpose that isn't performative. You don't want to be seen as successful. You want to feel soulfully in sync with your life. That shift changes everything. Suddenly, you no longer want to chase goals that don't resonate with your core. You'd rather disappoint others than abandon yourself. You'd rather rest than rush. You'd rather do it your way, even if no one claps, than keep performing for a round of applause that never really filled you. You realize how addicted you were to metrics, to provide progress reports, to the dopamine rush of being praised. But praise can't substitute for peace, and achievement can't mask alignment. So you begin to ask, what kind of life nourishes my nervous system? What kind of work makes my body exhale? What kind of relationships don't require me to shrink? You're no longer chasing success. You're courting alignment. And that realignment comes with its own kind of grief. Because you start letting go of the parts of you that once burned themselves out to feel worthy. The overachiever, the people pleaser, the perfectionist who mistook exhaustion for value. They fought hard. They served a purpose. But now they're tired, and your soul is asking for something softer. You begin to walk away from hustle culture, not because you're lazy, but because you're done being owned by urgency. You stop celebrating burnout as bravery. You stop equating busyness with importance. You stop needing to be everything for everyone. Carl Jung taught that wholeness is not about achieving more, but about becoming who you already are beneath the masks. And now, the mask of the high performer is slipping. And beneath it is someone who simply wants to live from the inside out. You find yourself valuing slow mornings over stacked calendars, real conversations over networking events, work that reflects your heart over work that just feeds your bank account. You still care about money, but now you ask what it costs to earn it. You still want impact, but now you ask whether your soul is included in the process. You become selective, sacredly selective, about where your time goes, about what gets your energy, about which goals are yours, and which were just dressed up expectations. And suddenly, more no longer feels like a virtue. You crave depth, not volume, meaning, not momentum, peace, not productivity. You don't want a life that makes others proud. You want a life that makes your soul say, "Thank you for not abandoning me." So you start making decisions differently, not from fear, not from pressure, not just to check boxes, but from alignment, from intuition, from the voice inside you that says, "This is who I am. This is how I move now." And yes, people may question you. They may think you've settled. They may not understand why you'd give up something so promising. They may say, "But you were doing so well." And you'll smile, because you know what they can't see. That success without self is just another form of loss. You are no longer available for an achievement that costs your mental health. You are no longer willing to sacrifice meaning for metrics. You are no longer interested in living a life that looks full but feels hollow. Because now you know, real success isn't measured by how high you climb. It's measured by how deeply you belong to yourself. Carl Jung would call this the return to the self, the reunion with your essence, beyond persona and performance. And that return can't be rushed. It can't be gamified. It can't be optimized. It requires slowness, presence, an unwavering commitment to you. So you permit yourself to change the definition, to redefine the metrics, to live in a way that honors your wholeness over your highlight reel. You start to see success not as a peak to reach, but as a rhythm to feel. Does this choice bring me closer to peace? Does this relationship bring me back to my breath? Does this work light me up when no one's watching? Those are the real questions now. And the answers guide you, quietly but surely, into a life that isn't always shiny, but is always real. You don't need to prove your worth anymore. You don't need to push through the pain to make it. You are already enough. You are already becoming. You are already home. Sign number 6. You feel an unshakable desire to break free from toxic cycles and begin choosing truth over familiarity. It begins with restlessness, a kind that doesn't let you sleep the same, doesn't let you laugh the same, doesn't let you pretend the same. You start noticing the weight of conversations that go nowhere, the heaviness of relationships that always ask for more than they give, the way your body tenses in places that used to feel like home. And suddenly, what once felt tolerable now feels unbearable. You've outgrown the drama, the games, the silent expectations, the loud justifications. You don't want to walk on eggshells anymore. You don't want to keep explaining why you're exhausted after every interaction. You don't want to keep shrinking just to stay in rooms that echo with confusion. Because now, your soul is waking up, and she's not interested in the performance. Carl Jung said, "We cannot change anything unless we accept it." But now that you've accepted what these patterns are, you can no longer participate. You no longer mistake chaos for passion. You no longer mistake inconsistency for mystery. You no longer confuse being needed with being loved. You've spent too long calling dysfunction normal, too long calling anxiety chemistry, too long staying loyal to cycles that cost you your clarity. But now, you're done. This is not bitterness. This is clarity. You're not pulling away to punish. You're pulling away to preserve. Because every time you betray your inner peace to keep a connection, you teach yourself that your peace is negotiable. And it's not. You realize that some people love the version of you that doesn't set boundaries, that doesn't ask hard questions, that doesn't say, "This isn't okay." But that version of you doesn't exist anymore. And so the invitations stop being about, "How do I fix this?" and become, "How do I free myself?" You start choosing discomfort over dishonesty, truth over tradition, inner stillness over external approval. You walk away from dynamics that force you to second-guess your instincts, from conversations that leave you drained instead of inspired, from people who confuse access to you with entitlement to you. And yes, it hurts. It hurts to realize how long you stayed. How much did you give? How deeply you believed things would change. But that pain is sacred because it proves you cared. And now it proves you're done sacrificing your truth just to stay connected. Carl Jung would call this the dissolution of the false self, the letting go of personas and projections that tethered you to unhealthy patterns. You're no longer here to perform. You're here to heal. You stop explaining your decisions to people who don't listen. You stop making space for relationships that don't make space for you. You stop begging for reciprocity in places where your presence was already the gift. You become unapologetically honest, not cruel, but clear. Clear about what you want. Clear about what you will no longer tolerate. Clear about the energy you bring and the energy you deserve. You begin choosing peace, even if it comes wrapped in loneliness. Because temporary loneliness is a small price to pay for permanent misalignment. You start replacing "they're not that bad" with "I deserve more." You stop waiting for people to rise and start rising on your own. You stop asking people to see your worth and start walking like it's non-negotiable. And in that shift, everything changes. You may lose people, but you'll find yourself. You may disappoint expectations, but you'll finally stop disappointing your soul. You realize that safety isn't found in familiarity, it's found in truth. And truth often feels like loss before it feels like liberation. You begin seeing the stories that kept you bound. If I love them enough, they'll change. If I explain myself better, they'll understand. If I stay, they'll finally show up. And now you whisper back, "I choose me." Not because you've given up on love, but because you've remembered what love isn't. Love isn't emotional whiplash. Love isn't confused with pretty words. Love isn't a loyalty test you keep failing. Love is clarity. Love is respect. Love is showing up without needing to be rescued. And now, you demand love that feels like alignment, not survival. You're no longer willing to be the emotional sponge in other people's storms. You're no longer available for connections that require you to abandon yourself. You're no longer watering gardens that only grow when you're bleeding. Carl Jung taught that when we stop projecting our wounds onto others, we finally begin to integrate, to reclaim what we gave away in the name of belonging. And now, you're reclaiming everything. Your time, your voice, your intuition, your rest, your softness, your right to say, no more. You begin healing not just by letting go of people, but by letting go of the version of you that kept choosing them. The you who needed validation more than honesty. The you who thought love had to hurt. The you who stayed silent so others could feel safe. You honor her. You thank her. But you don't let her lead anymore. Because now you're led by your truth. And your truth doesn't bargain. It doesn't bend for breadcrumbs. It doesn't negotiate with emotional starvation. It stands. It speaks. It protects the sacred within you. And in that protection, new life begins. You attract peace like a magnet. You draw in people who meet you with softness, not strategy. You find friendships that don't require recovery. You find lovers who know how to hold, not just take. You find that you are never truly alone when you are deeply aligned. This isn't the end, it's the exit. From cycles that held you hostage, from patterns that muted your power, from stories that said you had to settle. You're not running away. You're walking home, to yourself, to your boundaries, to your birthright of emotional clarity. And no, it won't be perfect. Some days you'll question yourself. Some nights the old ache will come knocking. But you won't answer, because now you know. Your peace is not up for negotiation. Your healing is not a group project, and your truth doesn't need consensus. It just needs commitment. Carl Jung said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." And you, right now, are stepping into that privilege, not by fixing the past, but by refusing to repeat it. This is your revolution. It doesn't scream. It doesn't beg. It simply says, I am free now. Sign number 7. You feel an irreversible shift in identity. And finally come home to the self. You no longer recognize the person you used to be, not in a dramatic, cut everything off kind of way, but in the quiet, undeniable knowing that you've crossed a threshold and there's no going back. Something inside you has changed. Not a phase, not a mood, a core level shift. Your name is the same. Your face is the same. Your life on the outside might still resemble the old one, but inside, you're not who you were. You've shed a skin that no longer fits. You've outgrown a version of yourself that was built for survival, not wholeness. And now, you're becoming real. Carl Jung called this the return to the self, the sacred reunion with your innermost truth, beyond the persona, beyond the projections. It doesn't feel like a celebration. It feels like standing in the middle of your life, holding pieces you used to cling to, and realizing they no longer define you. You don't need them anymore. The masks, the roles, the old storylines, you've outlived them. And now you're walking into the unknown, not with fear, but with reverence. You begin to realize the person you're becoming doesn't need to be explained. They just need to be lived. You feel it in the way you breathe more deeply, the way you pause before reacting, the way your silence now speaks louder than your explanations ever did. You're no longer performing. You're embodying. The wisdom you used to search for in books, podcasts, teachers, now rises from within you like a steady flame. You trust your intuition like a compass. You move with intention, not urgency. You choose what aligns, not what impresses. This shift isn't always easy to name. You just know that certain things don't tempt you anymore. You're not seduced by chaos. You're not moved by pressure. You're not available for anything that costs your soul its clarity. You've become solid, not hardened, just rooted. And from that rootedness, a new identity begins to emerge, one that doesn't need approval to breathe. You stop saying yes out of fear. You stop over-explaining. You stop shrinking when you feel misunderstood. Because now you know who you are, and that knowing is enough. You are not here to be everyone's cup of tea. You are not here to play by someone else's rules. You are not here to repeat your old cycles just because they're familiar. You're here to become. Fully, honestly, without apology. Carl Jung once said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." And that's exactly what you've stepped into. This shift is irreversible. You can't pretend anymore. You can't settle anymore. You can't go back to a life that asks you to betray your soul in order to belong. You begin to feel the difference between peace and numbness, between alignment and comfort, between love and dependency. You begin choosing what nourishes you, not what distracts you. You crave presence over productivity, wholeness over perfection, depth over performance. And when old versions of you try to resurface, the overachiever, the people pleaser, the one who tolerates too much, you meet them with compassion, not identification. You see them for what they are, protectors, adaptations, parts of you that once kept you safe, but now keep you small. You don't shame them, but you don't follow them either. Because the new you isn't built on fear. She's built on clarity. She's built on the truth that you are no longer a product of your past. You are the author of your future. You feel less reactive, less scattered, less needy. Because now, your identity isn't shaped by what others see. It's shaped by what you feel in your bones. You no longer need to prove anything. You simply live it. You walk into rooms differently. You take up space without effort. You move like someone who knows they belong, not because anyone said so, but because you finally believe it. This is the gift of becoming. Not confidence as a mask, but congruence as a way of being. You're no longer chasing to become someone. You're remembering who you've been all along. And now, you act accordingly. You honor your rest like it's holy. You protect your energy like it's sacred. You say no without guilt. You say yes only to what reflects your truth. This shift doesn't require a new wardrobe, a new city, or a new persona. It requires presence, and you've earned it through the unraveling, through the silence, through letting go of everything that was never really yours. Carl Jung taught that individuation isn't about becoming perfect. It's about becoming whole. And now, for the first time, you feel it. You are not just healing. You are integrating. You are becoming someone your younger self never believed was possible. Someone rooted in truth. Someone safe in their own skin. Someone who doesn't just know who they are, but lives it. And from this place, life begins to meet you differently. Opportunities arise that feel like soul assignments. People appear who speak your emotional language. Choices become easier, not because they're less complex, but because your clarity has become louder than your fear. You trust the unfolding. You trust yourself. You trust that anything not aligned will fall away, not as punishment, but as protection. Because now you know. Real power is not found in control. It's found in alignment. You are not becoming a better version of who others expected you to be. You are becoming a more honest version of the soul you already are. This shift is not a trend. It's a return to self, to source, to the deepest truth within you. So you walk forward, not with certainty, but with sovereignty. Not with a plan, but with presence. Not with perfection, but with peace. You have nothing left to prove, nothing left to earn, nothing left to force. Only this, a soul at home, a life in resonance, a self finally free. If something inside you stirred while listening, that's not a coincidence. It's your soul responding to the truth it's been waiting to hear. So if this message resonated, don't let it end here. Subscribe to the channel. Share this video with someone who's on the edge of their own becoming. And let us know in the comments, which sign spoke to you the most? Your story might be the mirror someone else needs to see their own. And remember, this isn't just a video, it's a doorway, and you've already stepped through.